Hello everyone, welcome back to another story, and thank you for all the love and support. I proposed to her twice, both times she said, "Not now." After the second rejection, I finally told her, "Then we're done." She never expected what happened next, especially when I walked into our shared office 3 months later with the woman who had truly been waiting for me all along. I gave 5 years of my life to building a future with a woman who treated my commitment like a backup option. The first time I proposed to Maya was on our anniversary at the Cliffside restaurant, where we had our first date. I had saved for 6 months to buy a ring that represented everything she meant to me. But when I opened the box, she didn't look at the diamond. She looked at her phone. She said her career was at a critical point and that getting engaged would be a distraction she couldn't afford. I swallowed my pride and slipped the ring back into my pocket, convincing myself she was right. She promised it was only bad timing and that her feelings for me hadn't changed. 2 years later, I asked again. This time it was simple and private, just the two of us in the living room of the apartment we shared. She had reached her professional goals, and I believed the timing would finally be right. But her response was even colder. She didn't let me finish before sighing and saying, "Not now." She told me she wasn't ready for the domestic expectations that came with marriage, and that we were perfectly fine as we were. She wanted the comfort of my presence and the stability of my income. But she refused to give me the one thing I needed to feel secure in our relationship. That night, as she slept beside me, I understood something painful. I wasn't her partner. I was her safety net. I paid the rent, covered the groceries, carried the emotional weight, while she kept her options open for someone she believed was better. The next morning, I calmly told her we were finished. At first she laughed, assuming I was being dramatic after the rejection. But when I started packing, her laughter turned into confusion and anger. She accused me of throwing away 5 years over a piece of paper. But I knew I was saving the next 50 years of my life from becoming a footnote in hers. I moved out that afternoon and cut off all contact, blocking her everywhere so I could heal without her influence. I poured my energy into my work at the architecture firm, and that's where I met Sarah. She was the lead designer on a project I managed, and the difference between them was striking from day one. Sarah didn't see commitment as a trap. She saw it as a foundation. We began as co-workers, became friends, and eventually, something deeper. 3 months after leaving Maya, I had to return to our old shared office to finalize the lease documents. And I wasn't going alone. The building lobby felt smaller than I remembered. The scent of polished floors triggered a brief flash of the life I had left behind. Sarah slipped her hand into mine, steady and reassuring, as we walked toward the elevators. I wasn't there to create a scene or show off my new happiness. I just needed to sign the final papers that would completely sever our financial ties. As the elevator rose to the 14th floor, I caught our reflection in the steel doors. We looked united, two people moving forward with shared purpose. When the doors opened, the first person I saw was Maya. She stood at the reception desk sorting mail, wearing the same distracted expression she always had. At the sound of the elevator, she looked up with a rehearsed smile that vanished the second she saw me. Her eyes fell to our joined hands, and then lifted to Sarah's face. I could almost see her mind racing as she tried to process how I had gone from the man she dismissed to someone standing confidently beside a woman who carried quiet strength. Maya stepped forward, her voice shifting into that soft tone she used whenever she wanted control. She said she had been meaning to call and had realized her timing had been wrong. She even suggested we grab a drink and talk about trying again, now that she was ready to reconsider our future. It was the clearest proof of her narcissism. She truly believed she could place me on a shelf like a trophy, waiting until she felt like claiming me again. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no longing, no interest in hearing excuses. I introduced Sarah as my partner and the new lead on the City Park project, a position Maya had pursued for months. The shock on her face was undeniable. In one moment, she had lost both her relationship and her biggest professional ambition. I told her I was there only for the signatures and that my lawyer had already reviewed the paperwork. Maya looked ready to explode, but the presence of the office staff kept her composed as I guided Sarah toward the conference room. The room felt cold and sterile, like the ghost of a relationship I was finally burying. Proudly was a fast sprint toward the top. Julian leaned closer to me, his voice coated in a smug tone of professional friendliness, and asked what I was doing with my life these days. I told him I worked in consulting and management, which technically wasn't a lie, though it was about as accurate as describing the ocean as a small puddle. He laughed, casually patted my shoulder, and said that if I ever wanted to see how a high-energy firm really operated, he might be able to arrange a guest pass for me to visit the lobby of his company's new headquarters. Elena nearly glowed with pride at his generous display. She excitedly told the group that Julian had always been incredibly giving with his time, even to people who simply couldn't keep up. I thanked him politely for the offer, already imagining the expression on his face when he stepped into my office on Monday morning. The irony of the entire situation was almost overwhelming. Elena had left me because she wanted a man who looked like a titan, someone who wore expensive suits and spoke with impressive confidence. Yet, she had chosen a man who was simply performing a role I had quietly written behind the scenes. Julian was the kind of person who confused activity with actual achievement, and Elena was the kind of person who mistook borrowed spotlight for her own sun. In many ways, they were perfectly matched in their shared love of appearances, and as I watched them together, I realized something important. I hadn't lost anything when she walked away from my life. I had simply cleared unnecessary clutter from my path, so there would be room for something real. The drive she admired so much in Julian was nothing more than a desperate hunger for validation, a hunger I had long ago outgrown. As the night slowly began winding down, a local reporter who regularly covered the tech and finance industry approached our group. Her eyes lit up the moment she recognized me, and she started stepping forward with her recorder in hand, likely hoping for a comment about the recent acquisition that had shaken the local business world. I caught her gaze and gave a clear nod toward the exit, silently signaling that I wasn't giving interviews tonight. She paused, confused for a moment, before noticing Elena and Julian standing beside me, like victorious conquerors. A small, mischievous smile appeared on her face as she quietly stepped back into the crowd. Elena never noticed the exchange. She was too busy admiring her reflection in the polished glass of Julian's watch, completely unaware that the countdown to their embarrassment had already begun. Monday morning arrived with a bright, almost clinical clarity, like the harsh light of a surgical room. I sat in my office on the top floor, the one with a panoramic view of the city Julian had confidently claimed he would one day conquer. I reviewed his file one last time. On paper, he looked impressive, but his behavior at the reunion had already revealed that his ambition was fueled more by ego than by substance. And that kind of ego eventually becomes a liability in any serious company. I soon heard the heavy double doors of the executive suite open, followed by my assistant announcing that Mr. Vance had arrived for his final orientation meeting with the owner. I leaned back in my chair, turning my back toward the door, and waited for the sound of his footsteps to reach my desk. Julian walked into the office with loud, rehearsed confidence, thanking the chairman for the opportunity, and promising to bring a level of energy the company had never experienced before. I listened patiently as he delivered a 3-minute speech filled with phrases about synergy, innovation, and market domination. When he finally finished, I slowly rotated my chair. The change in his face happened instantly. The color drained from his cheeks so quickly that I briefly wondered if he might faint onto the expensive Persian rug beneath his feet. His mouth opened, but no words came out as he stared at the quiet man from the reunion now sitting in the seat of the most powerful figure in his professional world. I leaned back calmly, folded my hands together, and asked if he had brought the guest pass he had promised me on Saturday night. The silence that followed sounded like a man's entire reality collapsing into a single terrifying moment. I explained to Julian that, while I admired ambition, my company had no place for executives who spent their weekends belittling others just to elevate themselves. I informed him that I was rescinding the job offer immediately, not because of his qualifications, but because of his character. He began stammering desperately, asking for another chance and mentioning how much Elena had been counting on this new lifestyle he had promised her. I calmly told him that Elena wanted a man with real drive, and now he had all the drive in the world to go find a job somewhere I didn't own. I pressed the security button and had him escorted from the building before he could finish his next sentence. An hour later, Elena called. Her voice shook with a mixture of anger and desperation that I found surprisingly easy to ignore. She had finally realized that in her rush to chase a titan, she had walked away from the man who had quietly built the very world she wanted to live in. I didn't answer the call. Instead, I blocked her number and returned to my work, understanding that the reunion had never really been about proving to her what she had lost. It had been about reminding myself what I had gained by letting her go. I'm at peace now, knowing that my success isn't a weapon meant to hurt others, but a shield that protects me from the shallow and the empty. Elena and Julian became a powerful reminder of the heavy price people pay when they build their lives on shallow values. And now I'm finally moving forward toward a future that belongs entirely to me. I'm curious, which part of the country are you listening to this story from today? And did you know that nearly 80% of our viewers haven't subscribed yet? If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And don't forget to check out our next video about a shocking Reddit cheating story where a husband discovers the truth about his cheating